Joining us on the program right now is our friend Pat Toomey, running for Senate in Pennsylvania. How you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Now, you're one of these guys I like to have on the program because you're just not a political hack. We could talk economics. We could talk about the health of our economy in this nation, and you'll put it to the people straight. When you see a political party who sees its political interests in growing a tax consumer class, that can't come with the general health of the nation.
No, and it's a pity that it's come to that because, there were many decades when many Democrats did not take this approach. John F. Kennedy stood up in front of the American people and talked about how lower taxes will lift the quality of life, the standard of living for everybody. There was a time when you could be pro-growth and still be in the Democratic Party. Now the party's clearly been captured by a liberal left wing that I'm concerned. You're right. They want to grow the number of people who are dependent, reduce the number of people who are paying all the bills, and just keep growing government. This is not a recipe for a successful society.
The website is ToomeyForSenate.com. Pat Toomey used to be with the Club for Growth. Now he's running for Arlen Specter. I hope your campaign people are looping that "act like a lady." I hope you guys are looping that over and over again in your campaign spots.
Well, we're not running any campaign spots yet. We've got a little ways to go before we get to that point. But I got to tell you, there are a lot of other people doing that for us. There's been a lot of exposure to that.
It should be "act like a lady." Vote for Pat Toomey.
Well, I think that people will connect those dots. He's really he's just way out of touch and out of step. I mean, who talks like that to somebody? It's so patronizing and condescending and so arrogant.
Let's get back to the Kennedy era Democrats. You're running in Pennsylvania. You would have to. Pennsylvania is still by and large a blue collar, not necessarily socially blue state. It's still considered a blue collar state.
Sure.
You've got steel, you've got mining, you've got a lot of what I call calloused hand Democrats.
Yeah.
Back in the 1960s, John F. Kennedy saw globalization, and he saw modernization as a way to combat globalization, and went before a joint session of Congress in 1961 and said, if we want to compete, we have to reduce the tax burden on business so they can grow and hire more Americans. There was a time when Democrats understood that the working man couldn't get a fair shake if he wasn't working.
Exactly right. There was a time when there were many Democrats who understood that business is not the enemy of America, for crying out loud. It's a source of jobs and prosperity, and that the private sector has to pay all the bills. Ultimately, government doesn't create wealth. Governments, they can destroy wealth and redistribute wealth, but ordinary men and women who get up every day and go to work and make things and provide services, that's where prosperity comes from. I think John F. Kennedy understood that completely, and unfortunately, that thinking in the Democratic Party, among elected Democrats anyway, seems to be hidden in a closet somewhere. I just don't hear that message coming from elected Democrats.
Now, where along the way do you think that got lost? Because when I look at speeches given by JFK, when I look at speeches being given by old school Democrats on up to Reagan, who had the Reagan Democrats, it seemed to me there was an understanding that economic health came from a symphony of profit-driven individuals, small businesses, and companies all getting together to engage in beneficial transactions. And when that happened, when you had small business, big business, individuals, people making money and spending money, the government too saw its revenues go up.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Of course, that's the irony of it. If they understood the dynamics better, they would realize that all problems.
But wait, where along the way do you think this happened? Because you're obviously coming up with messaging to take on Arlen Specter in Pennsylvania. Where along the way do you think that Democrats lost their way with understanding how the economy benefited everyone when the government didn't overburden the economy?
It's a good question. I don't know that I've got a great answer as to exactly when that became the dominant thinking within the Democratic Party. My gut tells me it was probably during the 1970s, when a time when we even had Republicans who lost their way on this. I mean, remember, Richard Nixon imposed wage and price controls. I mean, clearly a terribly bad policy for economic growth, and he was a Republican. So we were mired for a full decade. Jimmy Carter's economic policies were disastrous. We were mired for a decade in economic misery, often thinking that, well, maybe the Soviets didn't have it so wrong. I used to hear people say that. And it took Ronald Reagan to really restore the common sense, and it's not a coincidence that he was enormously popular and enormously successful.